Yeah, it was probably about 7 years ago when I first heard about Brian and about his research into an organisation called Common Purpose. And those of you who are familiar with my Hidden Agenda presentation, which I recorded in July of 2006, in that presentation I made the observation that Common Purpose was being established in the UK. And of course, we now know it's going much wider than the UK, but its attempt is to emulate the role of Phi Beta Kappa in the US, which is a very powerful fraternity. We don't have, I'll talk more about this perhaps later, but we don't have an equivalent to Phi Beta Kappa, or didn't have an equivalent to Phi Beta Kappa, but it's emerging through Common Purpose. And whilst I was away, and whilst I was out of the UK, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that the mainstream media were running articles on Common Purpose. Now, unfortunately, I didn't see Brian's name mentioned in any of those articles, and of course it was all the reporters from those particular publications claiming credit for the research. But it was pretty obvious that the bulk of their research had come from Brian's website. And of course, it shouldn't be any surprise that this subject becomes of interest to the mainstream media right in the wake of the Levinson inquiry. But that's just one element of Brian's focus. He's branched into so many areas. He has certainly carved a place for himself as one of the leading researchers in the alternative community. Of course, the alternative soon to become mainstream, right? That's what we're working on, isn't it? So Brian has a very powerful presentation for you this afternoon. It's all brand new. I know that because he was working on it on the train coming up this morning.
You're not supposed to say that.
Oh, so wasn't I? Oh, sorry. But, that is the best way to put a presentation together. You thought I was joking when I said I need a half-hour break to put mine together this afternoon. It's the best way to put a presentation together because it's right there. It's right on your mind. You don't have to sort of stop and think about what it was you thought you were going to say about that. It's right there. So anyway, we have a powerful afternoon because Brian is going to be followed pretty much immediately by Ken O'Keefe, and then we'll have a short break, and then I'll bring the day to a conclusion, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers with all of the speakers that you've seen today. So without further ado, please put your hands together for Brian Gerrish. Thank you.
We'll look at the clock first, because Ian's always a stickler for time. OK, good afternoon, everybody. Question, first of all, how many of you know something about Common Purpose? OK, well, that's excellent. How many of you read what appeared in the press about Common Purpose? OK. A little while ago at Stoke, with an audience of 300, when I asked that question, how many of you have read a bit about Common Purpose in the press? There was about 10% of the room went up, so 30 people out of 300. And I found that quite interesting because there was a lot in the press. I'm going to give you a lot of information this afternoon. I've only got an hour, so I'm going to rattle through it. And I'm doing it like that because obviously when the video goes out, it gives people all over the place a chance to look at that information and study it. So I'm only apologising a bit for going quite fast and giving you a lot. But I'm going to try and tell you something, and that is that the press have not exposed Common Purpose. I think they've done something very, very different. They've put up a huge smokescreen. And the reason they've done that is Common Purpose is infinitely more dangerous than the Daily Mail would have you believe. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at what's really been going on. I'll try and explain it, and then I'm going to say towards the end what we need to do. The first thing to understand is there's a war going on. And basically, all good people, it doesn't matter what your religion, what your beliefs, what your colour is, if you're in Britain at the moment, somebody is attacking us. And I'm on record on Wikipedia, I think, because Brian, in his paranoia, they've got that little bit in, said, what do these people want to do? They want to kill you. I'm going to repeat that. If you want to know what these people want to do, they want to kill us. And they've started the killing program in the hospitals. They've now moved from old people onto babies. If you haven't seen that in the press, it's something you've missed. But if you're weak, sick, vulnerable, you are no good to the state and they want to get rid of you. Anybody know another nation state where that little policy came in? Nazi Germany. That's how they began. And they began by training people and desensitizing them so that people didn't have normal compassion for each other. They weren't caring and loving. Have you heard the little bit in the press over the last week where somebody's suggesting that doctors and nurses need to be taught how to be compassionate? How many of you have heard that? Well, this, of course, is nonsense on one hand, and on the other hand, it's true. Because what has gone on is that the doctors and nurses have been trained, and in the training, unbeknown to them, they've been desensitized. So this stuff is real, and I'm going to show you some of it. Just a little bit of advertising. UK Column on our website is now doing a daily news show from 12 to 12:30. And on a Thursday, we do a 2-hour programme. It's going very well. If you want to log on, you'll see a little window comes up about 5 minutes before 12 o'clock. And we have been producing what we think is a pretty good news programme where we interpret what's actually going on in the news and try and tell you what's really going on. So do have a look at that. Mike Robinson, brilliant. How does that work? Hang on a minute. Okay. Sorry, Mike, obviously I pressed the wrong button. That's Mike, and that's Louise Collins. I'll come back to Louise a little bit later. Mike has done a huge amount to get the UK column up and working properly. And if you can't get in touch with him or you get frustrated because he's not replying or I'm not replying, it's because we can only just cope with what's going on at the moment. What did we manage to do? Well, right at the beginning of this year, the UK column, am I standing in the way? You okay? The UK column exposed what was really going on with Leveson, and we identified that basically the Leveson inquiry was common purpose at work. And we had already written some articles, but in this particular article, we put in the full truth, that this whole media inquiry was a scam with a common purpose. Okay. Now, this is something I want you to focus on, because at the moment, the media has gone incredibly quiet on the subject of the paedophiles. So we have had Savile, who of course on this picture is the only paedophile. Savile is the man that has been picked up, but at the moment it's gone quiet. The BBC's not talking about him. 1 or 2 people arrested, but they tend to be the pop star media people. What we're not seeing is any connections through into the people in government. So ask yourself, how did Jimmy Savile manage to get access into Broadmoor? Well, of course, somebody in government gave him the permission to get into Broadmoor. I'm not talking about the paedophiles today, I'm talking about the press and the media. But if you want to know what I now believe we are living in a country run by paedophiles. And I've summed it up there. Supposing the real paedophiles are in power, they're in Westminster and they're in the public sector, which we think is there to protect families and children. And I think the evidence now is overwhelming that that is the case. So here he is, little boy blue. And is that the question, the press and the media to be ruled by law? Well, of course, there's a big debate going on. No, there isn't. Cameron is saying, if you don't do what I tell you to, I shall have to unleash Labour on you, and Labour is going to make sure the press is going to be ruled by law. But this is a lie, because who is going to rule the press and media? It's the state. It's nothing to do with law, it's nothing to do with justice or common sense. The agenda is to get the state running the whole of the press and the media. Why do you want to do that as a state? Well, if you're going to run a dictatorship And that's what they're building. You have to control the media and the press. So where's Mr. Leveson, or where was he recently? He produced the report and then he ran away to Australia to give a talk in Sydney. He refused to answer questions here. So he does the dirty deed, then he runs away to Australia. And then I'm going to say it is an amazing coincidence that when Mr. Leveson is in Australia, an Australian media company makes a dirty phone call inquiring about Kate Middleton. What an amazing coincidence. That's all I'm going to say on that. Now, this young man had something to say on Leveson because I think his name's Brett. According to Lord Leveson's report, this young man helped set up the Independent. So what this guy said is the fact that someone, especially a judge, has believed something on Wikipedia is kind of shocking. Kind of shocking. This is Lord Leveson's report based on Wikipedia. He added, my friend went on and edited a bunch of Wikipedia pages and put my name there. It was a joke. But Lord Leveson used Wikipedia in his report. So that's one small piece of evidence of how detailed this inquiry was. So here we are, 16th of November. I was having a cup of tea in the kitchen. My wife came in with a newspaper and dropped it on the table, and I looked at it and I couldn't believe my eyes. This was the front page of the Mail with Sir David Bell. Here he is, portly, grinning person. He was the lead person on Leveson's panel. So what did the Mail do? The Mail, in 11 detailed pages, absolutely took the Leveson inquiry apart. So they did a special investigation initially where they did an overview, but this is what they're already saying about Common Purpose, promoting their own ideological agenda. And this is what I've been warning about. Common Purpose is not a benign educational charity. It's a very dangerous political charity, and it's pushing an agenda. Here's the picture of the evil crew. And just look at the language, quasi-Masonic. I found that fascinating because I wondered why the Mail was going to pick a fight with the Freemasons. And a lot of them got pretty stroppy because this is how Common Purpose was defined. No, I don't support Freemasons and I don't agree with it. But I was just interested that the Mail did this. There were questions over Bell's neutrality. And they describe Common Purpose as being like a big octopus, and that's a very good description. Imagine those tentacles coming around every part of society and strangling them. That's how it works. It goes on, pulling the levers of power. So here's an educational charity. Who pays for it? We do. What is it doing? Pulling the levers of power. Sorry. I'll just run on through because there's a lot of this stuff. And this is how they described it, a nuclear bomb being dropped on the press. This is pretty strong language. Who's the guy in the picture? Max Mosley. What did he get up to? He got filmed in an orgy with several prostitutes. He then won a huge court case because the papers said there was a Nazi theme to it. There wasn't a Nazi theme, it was sadomasochistic. The orgy took place, he wins the damages, and here is this man crowing because he's been used by Lord Leveson to tell us how the press and media should be controlled. This is common sense on its head. And if you put common sense on its head, I'm going to say to you, it's absolutely dark arts because it's satanic. Here he is, David Bell, raking in money through his own charities and organisations. How the Left's Old Boy Network helps appoint the top mandarins. The lie. This is not a left-wing organisation, as I'm going to show you. So here's a very detailed article with the spin. Common Purpose is not left-wing. It's not right-wing. It's communitarian. It's driving its own agenda. Here was the editorial, and this is what the Daily Mail rightly said: the public has got a right to know what's actually going on. This is the Telegraph. So it wasn't just the Mail pulling this thing apart. The Telegraph went into it as well. And so did the Sun, with some amazing photographs. This is a very sweaty Mr. Leveson in front of the spotlights of the inquiry. Lefty plotters. Right? Notice the spin. It's left-wing, it's an old boys network. No, it's not. It's a dangerous political agenda. But what the papers did, which was brilliant because it makes my life easy, is they started to produce these very good network diagrams where they showed all the faces. I'm going to show you this a bit more in a clearer way. So that previous one was the Sun. This is the Times, excuse me. And if we just run through who we've got Sir David Bell. He's one of the key people with Common Purpose. He's also involved with the Media Standards Trust, but he was Leveson's lead panel advisor. Here's his number 2, Julia Middleton, Chief Executive of Common Purpose. They set up the Media Standards Trust, which campaigns for control of the media. They set up the Hacked Off campaign, which is their lobbying and calling for control of the press, and they rake in people like Hugh Grant. And what the rest of the diagram shows is that all of the Common Purpose people were used to come in to give evidence into the Leveson inquiry. Vested interest, just unbelievable. And in the Mail and the Telegraph and the Sunday Times and the Sun, all of this detail about this fraud and corruption and vested interest was highlighted, except they called it left-wing, as if the Tories weren't involved. And that is a huge lie. Here's Mr. Leveson, of course. Now, this is what David Bell said in his declaration of interest for the inquiry. He's chairman of Common Purpose, a registered charity which operates in the UK, some 10 other countries, and run leadership courses. And then at the bottom it goes on, it says, Common Purpose had several dealings in the past with the Information Commissioner's Office in connection with comments that have been made repeatedly about it on the web without, in Common Purpose's view, any foundation at all. I'm going to say he's mainly talking about me, but everything we've put on the internet, we've put with the evidence to support it. So this man, who was lobbying for Leveson's inquiry to take place, simply dismisses we've done nothing wrong. I think he's a liar. Here is the Mail talking about how Common Purpose broke the law. In this paragraph here, they said that on the specious basis that freedom of information legislation was being abused, causing damage to the charity's reputation, Common Purpose created a blacklist. And they collected information on people, and what the Mail points out, that this was breach of data protection. This was a criminal offence where they branded people trying to find out where public money went as being vexatious. And at the end, the Mail says here, in other words, Common Purpose tried to block the legal rights of those individuals and prevent their freedom of expression. So that's Sir David Bell, the lead man in Common Purpose, the head of the Media Standards Trust, the driver behind the Hacked Off inquiry, and the man who led Leveson's panel. This is a stitch-up on an incredible scale. That's what the Mail said, but they could have proved it because this is a selection of that blacklist that Common Purpose compiled, where councils were giving Common Purpose the names and addresses and sometimes the telephone numbers of people who'd actually made perfectly lawful, legitimate inquiries about how Common Purpose was spending council money. So this is a criminal act by Common Purpose, And yet the man who's ultimately responsible for this was sitting on the Leveson panel criticising journalists for hacking people's data. Right? You can smile, but this is unbelievably serious because this organisation is everywhere. Everywhere. Now, we've published a certain amount on it. I've just given 2 examples, but Sheffield City Council's accounts, 1.8 billion, were held up for several months. They were not signed off because in Sheffield they've been giving bungs, lump sums to Common Purpose with no proper receipts or audit trail. Eventually, the Audit Commissions allowed Sheffield to sign their accounts off. Why? Because the Audit Commission, as with the Information Commissioner's Office, is riddled with Common Purpose graduates. And what they do is they cover for each other. So here's an example of fraud and corruption with Common Purpose at the back of it. This is Surrey, where the Common Purpose Chief Executive was giving contracts to his Common Purpose friends. This is not Freemasonry at work, this is a charity at work. Speak to me. So let's have a look at what Mr. Leveson thinks, or who we should use to control the press and the media. This is one of my favourite ones, Liberty. And this is the lady, of course, Shami Chakrabarti. So she was in the Olympics, wasn't she? Waving a flag or something. She's the person who lectures us on freedoms and liberty. She was on Leveson's panel. And Liberty is an organisation that a few years ago was working directly with pro-paedophile organisations. I'm not making this up, it's fact. Paedophile Action for Liberty, Paedophile Information Exchange were being helped by Liberty to gain greater rights. I will tell you what I now totally and utterly believe is happening in this country. They are working flat out to try and make paedophilia acceptable. And they are going to do it through the gay movement. And if anybody's gay here and that upsets them, I'm not pointing a finger at you. I am saying they are going to use the gay movement to nibble the edges over what's acceptable. And that is why Peter Tatchell is happy to say in public some of his friends have slept with 13-year-olds, but there's nothing wrong in that. Because after 13 comes 12, 11, 10, 9. The regime that's being installed wants euthanasia. It also wants to make it acceptable to have sex with children. I'll take a bet on it with anybody in the room. Now let's look at the quality of these people that Leveson used. So this was an interesting article in The Independent where the Sun was talking about illegal payments to a US serviceman for pictures of Saddam Hussein. And the man talking about this was Chris Bryant MP. He used to run London's Common Purpose organisation. He's a Common Purpose trained leader. Let's have a look at him. So he told the House of Commons on Monday that the Sun newspaper paid a substantial sum for the picture of the Iraqi dictator in his underpants. And Chris Bryant MP was very upset about this. Disgraceful. What are the newspapers doing? Well, I've got a couple of pictures. So here's Saddam Hussein in his underpants. Who's this man? Right? There's some dignity in this picture before this man was murdered by the British and the Americans. There's absolutely no dignity. This is Chris Bryant advertising himself on a gay site. This is a British politician. And somebody said to me, are the underpants the same? But I'm going to leave you with the thought that if I look at these two men side by side, this man may have been terrible, but there's something about him here that's got a quiet dignity about it. And I do not see any dignity about the man that Mr. Leveson would have us believe is the man to tell us how to control the press and media. I'm not making any of this up. And here is Chris Bryant's election agent, sentenced to 7 years in prison for some of the most serious child porn ever seen, including month-old babies. Well, here he is, Hugh Grant. Here's another one. Hugh Grant is the man to tell us how the press and the media should behave. So let's have a look at Hugh Grant. What was he up to in the back of a taxi with a prostitute? I don't think we really want to know. Is this man the right man to be telling us what to do? I don't think so. Common Purpose thinks so, because Julia Middleton was praising this man as a brave leader for standing up and criticising the press. Julia Middleton, who is the same woman who's been getting her organisation into school after school after school throughout this country to reframe the minds of your children with subjects you can't even imagine. Common Purpose has not been exposed. A huge smokescreen has been put up. This organisation is unbelievably dangerous. Well, let's have a look at another person. Well, this is a surprise one because we only found this gentleman the other day. His name's Julian Petley. And I had a little conversation with this gentleman on the phone because he wrote a little column in a website called Inform. I haven't spelt it wrong, that's how it's spelt, where he rips apart the Daily Mail article. So I said to him on the phone, have you got any evidence in front of you to support what you're saying? And he said, well, I referred to some Guardian articles. And I said, but the Guardian, via the Scott Trust, has been funding the Media Standards Trust, which has been pushing for Leveson. Have you got any evidence to support what you're saying? Click, the phone went down. So I thought, this is an interesting man, so I went looking for him. Well, here he is on the Hacked Off campaign, so he's obviously a friend of Julia Middleton's. So what sort of stuff does this man get up to? This is what he gets up to. This is an event at Bournemouth University where they were having a seminar on snuff movies. And when I got into the programme, there was some stuff I really didn't like, apart from this sort of stuff. Offensive, nasty, sadistic. Well, what I didn't like is this little seminar was suggesting that snuff movies, films of real people and children being murdered, is a figment of people's imagination. Well, if you talk to police who are in the child protection teams, they'll tell you these films are real. So I'd like to know why Mr. Leveson thinks that this professor is the sort of man to be telling us how we should control the press and the media. And we pay for this man because, of course, he's a lecturer at one of the universities, and Bournemouth University we're all helping to fund through our taxes. We could go in a different direction. Sorry, that's just his name there to prove that what I'm saying is real. So he was a special speaker. We could go in another direction. Here's Emma Watson. Well, of course, she knows a lot about all sorts of things, Harry Potter and wizards. But now this young lady is pulled forward to tell us how the media and the press should be running. This is madness. And it is madness because the regime being installed turns everything on its head. Yeah? The people who are the criminals get rewarded. The people who are victimised get victimised further. Everything is twisted. So this lady knows nothing about anything, but she's put forward as if she can tell us about the press. Here's what the Mail said in a survey, and I'm going to say I think this is pretty reasonably accurate. They said 55% of people were interested in what was going to happen with the paedophiles. And it points out that basically, at the bottom, when they're talking about laws, 70% of people said we've already got laws to deal with the press. And only 23% said that we should be looking for more laws. Why Leveson? Because Common Purpose said Leveson should happen. That's why. Then we get this. I can go through this quite quickly because I suspect the speakers touched on it, but it went from Leveson to tweeting. If you're talking about paedophiles, of course we're not saying this gentleman is a paedophile. If you're talking about paedophiles, then basically you could be sued. And one of the local MPs in Plymouth got very hot under the collar when she got a list of all the paedophiles and child abusers in the Labour Party. Oh, I can't deal with this because we may be sued. This is what they want to happen, that we're frightened of speaking out. Here's a man who every time I saw him, he was tragically upset about being called a paedophile. It was libelous, it was incorrect. But the number of pictures of clips I saw where he was smiling made me a bit suspicious. Who's paying for it? We are. BBC shells out £185,000 of our money. Here she is again. I'm going to call her the Wicked Witch. Right? 1 minute she's involved with Leveson. The next minute she's the only person who can speak for Leveson. The next minute she says she's backing Cameron. We don't need the law to control newspapers. Shall I tell you why? Because they didn't want that in the first place. That was the scare tactic over here. What they wanted was a new body to control the media and the press, and that new body was to have been, in my opinion, the Media Standards Trust. When the Media Standards Trust was exposed, they're running around like headless chickens. So at the moment there's a big war going on, and it's between Murdoch and his boys and the government at the moment trying to get state control. This lady's dangerous because she plays both sides of the fence. This is what Common Purpose says. Wherever we are, you'll find leaders doing unusual things. Not my language, their language. Locally, CP graduates will be lighting small fires to create change. Small changes brought about by leaders who have themselves changed. They're telling you that they're brainwashing people, reframing them. It's their language, not mine. And this is interesting, isn't it? I keep coming up with this slide because Common Purpose said it was a foul abuse and slander that they had paedophiles in their organisation. So here's two Common Purpose paedophiles, this man incredibly dangerous, and here he is right alongside David Cameron. That was very unfortunate for Mr. Cameron. Trinity Mirror leaps in and says basically lawyers have got to get stuck into the phone hanging. Here's the media spin starting. Common Purpose started the whole thing. This is ex-editor of the Sunday Mail, I think, sent all of the Mail articles to the Tory MPs. He made sure they each got a copy of the paper. I think he was thinking the right thing. He was sending what he believed was a left-wing old boy organisation to the Tories. But of course, this man doesn't know what's really going on, because this is what's going on. Here's Sir David Bell, Common Purpose. Here's his number two, Julia Middleton, Common Purpose. Here's Francis Maud, Tory Cabinet Office, Common Purpose. Here's the head of the Civil Service, Common Purpose. Here's Cameron, Common Purpose. Lord Patton, head of the BBC, Common Purpose. Robert Peston, well, he's a great propaganda merchant, Common Purpose. And the BBC riddled with Common Purpose. We've now got BBC people calling us saying, we're watching colleagues not acting normally. Why? Because they're having their heads interfered with. So that diagram shows that it is a huge lie. How are we doing for time here? It's a huge lie that this is a left-wing organisation. It's so easy when you know where to look for these people. Here he is, one of the biggest liars in politics. And I'm delighted to stand here publicly and call this man a liar. He is an unbelievable liar. Give the watchdog teeth or get a new press law. What's special about this man? Well, of course, he's the man who withheld his own private emails from Leveson. So whilst Leveson was demanding the newspapers had to give up all their information, this toad only gave Leveson Inquiry a couple of his emails while he hid the rest. Why did he do that? Because he's got stuff to hide, basically. But luckily, the Telegraph dug it out a bit. So this is a list down here of, it goes on. I can't scroll down for you, but on the website you can. And the Daily Telegraph dug out that there were a total of 59 emails, most of which David Cameron hid from his chum who was running the Leveson Inquiry. We're not heading towards a situation where Westminster's out of control. It is already out of control. The criminals are in Westminster. And our job, and where we're going to end, is we have to get these people replaced by good people as soon as we can. If you do some research into the rise of the Nazis, what is really scary about it is not the violence that they used, it's the fact that it was about 20-25 people who were able to create the whole of the political climate in Germany. 20 or 25 of them. That's really scary. So we have got a cross-party politics at the moment working, and we need to understand what they're doing. Here's another man who I think does not tell the truth. Chris Patton. So he's in charge of the BBC, the biggest propaganda machine the world has ever seen. I listen to the BBC because I want to hear the propaganda and how they're doing it. The lies over what they do report, the propaganda over the important things they don't report, the lies over Syria. BBC staff are directly responsible for helping create the climate where we now see hundreds of thousands of people dying in Syria. The BBC is responsible because the BBC at the moment is supporting the winding up of the violence. Can I demonstrate what the BBC is like? I hope this is going to work. This young lady contacted me a couple of weeks ago. She wanted to know more about what we'd been writing about the sexual abuse of youngsters at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. She'd read the newspaper articles we'd written. She asked me good questions. We agreed that we would meet and I would show her documents and statements. And then, if all went well, we would get together with some of the victims. And I said to her, you have to understand some of these people are very scared, so we have to build up trust. Oh, I understand that, she said. So there was a gap of about a week, 10 days. I then called her to set up a meeting. And this is what happened in the conversation.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hello. Is that Nicholas Stanbridge?
It is.
Yeah, hi. It's Brian Gerrish from the UK column.
Oh, hi there, Brian.
We spoke, a week and a bit ago.
Yeah.
I was basically taking a bit of time off with the family last week. I've been back this week, which is now flown by. And I thought I would give you a call to say, are you still interested in the meet-up and look at some material?
At the moment, the answer is no, because I've been landed with a number of projects to get done now before Christmas. So should we put it on hold for the time being? If I come back to it, I'll give you a call.
Well, you can do, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with the abuse of children, which, as we're seeing in the mainstream press, we've got extraordinary things happening. And this is not something that, I do not know what is the matter with our mainstream press at the moment, but, what is more important than the safety of young children and young people?
Well, if it's any, it's no, obviously it's it's not to be complacent about, but I mean, I'm putting together a piece about anorexia among children at the moment. I mean, I'm not exactly off looking into some serious subjects and there's other lighter subjects. I mean, they're all there and they're running away, but...
Well, okay, I'm going to say that you came to me, it's a serious subject, we've been battling now for months to break this thing, but obviously it's not very high on your priorities, that's what you're telling me.
Well, it might not be my priorities we're talking about, but I mean, I just have to crack on with this list of projects that I've got to...
Well, you take on your editor, but I really despair at what is going on in this country. We've got these horrific stories coming out about what's been going on in the children. We've got idiots like Little John today trying to make out the whole thing is conspiracy theory. If you knew, which I'm sure you don't, what they really do to these children, I think you'd want to do something about it. But okay, Radio 4 editors are not interested, that's what you're telling me?
Not at the moment, because, I mean, we've explored with the council and the police, we've made calls, and, you know, at the moment...
so what you're telling me is that you've spoken to all the people guilty of the cover-up, and they're telling you that there's nothing in the story, so you've dropped it.
Well, we haven't dropped it. I mean, we never started it.
Well, give me an idea of what the council have said.
Well, if it's all right, I'd rather not, Brian.
Well, I'll tell you what they said. They said there's nothing in the story. So you have not sat down with me to look, because I was going to sit you down to let you look at statements written by some of these young people. And I guarantee you would be stunned and horrified. And all you've done is spoken to the very people who are refusing to properly investigate and deal with this abuse.
Right. We've spoken to a number of people around the case.
Have you spoken to any of the victims?
Well, we've spoken to you, and if you...
Have you spoken to any of the victims?
By all means, if you think that they should get in contact with us, please...
No, I'm not playing that game, because you are telling me you are not taking the matter seriously. You've spoken to the very people who are covering up what has been done to these children.
Well, we're not prepared to go through you in terms of talking to these children.
What do you mean by that? I have offered to let you read the statement.
But we would like to speak to them independently and on their own.
That is possible.
They are absolutely, you have my details, you can by all means pass on my details.
So I said to you,
That's what it has to be.
I said to you, I was prepared to see whether that could happen.
If they want to raise these allegations, we're just today going on Radio 4, you get them to call me. If there are several witnesses and they corroborate what's going on, then we'll take it forward. But that's all I can offer.
You think that I'm going to get witnesses? Some of these people are very frightened to make a phone call to you when you are telling me that your investigative journalism is so casual, the only people you've spoken to are the very authorities that are covering this up.
Well, we've spoken to other people involved as well.
Have you spoken to any victims?
I'm letting you have my details, and if there are any victims that you want to ask to call, that's fair enough, Brian.
Nicola, please answer the question. Have you spoken to any victims?
Yeah, well, we're not going to go through you to speak to the victims. If they want to speak to us, that's absolutely acceptable.
But how can you not go through me if I am the person in contact with victims and you're not?
You should be controlling victims, Brian. I think if there are victims, you should let them call me directly and I review what they have to
Are you
say.
suggesting that I am controlling people who've been abused?
Well, you are if you're not letting them call me independently.
They won't call you because they're not going to call people they don't trust. And what I said to you is trust has to be built up.
You shouldn't suggest to people that there's no reason to trust a journalist as a police.
You've told me so far that the only people you're prepared to speak to are the very authorities who are covering up the abuse in the first place.
No, we've spoken to people around the subject.
Have you spoken to any victims?
You have my number. Please pass it on to the victims and say to them that I'm unbiased and I will listen to what they have to say.
So you,
what those two of you to speak to victims of abuse violence.
you're part of the Today, Radio 4 Today programme, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Nicola. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Do you enjoy that? What's incredibly interesting about this is we've got a little more work to do, but we think her boss is one of the key men responsible for the internal investigation into Mr. Jimmy Savile. Ooh. So this is how it's done, right? That lady contacted me. She asked me whether I would provide information, whether I could show her documents, whether I would meet, and I said yes, yes, yes. And in the beginning, when I said we need to build a bit of confidence, she said, yes, I completely understand that. She's been got, hasn't she? She's been warned off. So this is how the BBC covers up paedophilia and child abuse. And she's gone. I've done that again. Let me come back a minute. Here we go. Part of me feels a bit sympathetic for this young lady, but not very much. Because, oh, sorry, see if I can move on. Because this is basically how the cover-up is done. This is how the paedophiles carry on their work, because people will not grip it. They won't get stuck in. All right? This is how the BBC does it. Holly Gregg, give a mention to later. BBC Scotland, going to do an investigative programme, going to do it. Yes, we believe it. Yes, we've seen the evidence. No, we're not. Right, the BBC, my opinion, and I think there's other people in this room, the BBC covered up Jimmy Savile because it was part of the culture. They are still covering up. And the trail leads to politicians. Now, this is an interesting man, Mr. Hislop, editor of Private Eye, because we sent Private Eye a lot of information about Common Purpose. I've got the acknowledgement emails about it, but we never got any questions asked. And then all of a sudden, after the Mail has blown the story about Common Purpose, here's Ian on Have I Got News For You? And it was Roger Moore who was hosting. And Roger Moore was very interesting. It says here that Ian will answer the next question. And the next question is, what did the Mail have to say? And he said, a load of rubbish, a load of nonsense about Common Purpose. Isn't it interesting that Mr. Hislop can write 6-8 pages on fraud and corruption on the NHS, but when it comes to Common Purpose, it's all rubbish. So was he paid to say what he said on the BBC? I've been wondering which side of the line Private Eye has been on for some time. They talk about all the bad stuff that's happening. They never talk about why it's happening. I now believe Private Eye is working for the other side. Here's Ken Clarke. We just give him a mention in the background, giving judges greater powers with courts with no juries. Take control of the media, then set up more courts where there are no juries of your peers. Right? You're very close to the Stalinist, Soviet, East German, Nazi system. So these people, he's not an idiot. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's a very dangerous man, but he knows absolutely what he's trying to set up. So you've got Common Purpose helping to create the environment for Leveson. Leveson, of course, a judge as well, pressing for control of the press. He's doing it from the outside. And here's Kenneth, and I don't know whether anybody's mentioned him so far today, but he's got a few skeletons in the cupboard. And he's now saying we need secret courts. Come on, machine. This was something Mike picked up with the Telegraph talking about Leveson advisors being barred from discussing their opinions. The only person allowed to speak on behalf of Leveson, Shami Chakrabarti, Common Purpose, and herself a lawyer. I did say lawyer as opposed to lawyer. Well, here she is. This was sent to us the other day by somebody who had a shock because they went into Lidl and they bumped into Julia Middleton. Now, Juliet earns roughly £100,000 a year out of her charity Common Purpose, and Common Purpose is overwhelmingly funded from our purse. Shall we give ourselves a round of applause for that? Well done. And Julia was looking a bit stressed in this picture, but what interested us was she had a trolley full of baked beans. So presumably you can only just scrape by on 100,000 a year. Meanwhile, we know that the NatWest Bank is beginning to close in on Common Purpose because they've had to take some very big loans recently from their own trustees because they're not getting the public money in fast enough. Yeah, so the NatWest is one step away from receivership. And this is a charity who says that it's advising people overseas on how to run their countries. It's not a joke. It's not madness. This is the result of something very nasty in the country. If we get deeper, how many of you saw the story where the foster couple had children taken away because they were UKIP members? Whoa. The state can take your children away if your political view is wrong. What the papers didn't say is the lead woman here, Joyce Thacker, absolutely Common Purpose trained, up to the eyeballs. She's been reframed. And this is how they do it. This is Common Purpose running courses inside children's services. They're called collab courses. Notice the corruption in the text. I can't deal with it today, but how they write the symbology is how they talk to each other. So here's Common Purpose. They need to make leaders out of social services people. Why? Because these are the people who are going to handle the victims. Eilish Angelini, the lady who was the senior person in law north of the border, she's now moved down to Oxford. She was writing papers under her maiden name where the agenda was to make it easier for men to bugger boys north of the border in Scotland. That's the sort of viewpoint she held. She's now a prize, what do they call her? Head of St Hugh's College, Oxford. This is the lady who has spent hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money trying to shut Robert Greene up for exposing the abuse of Holly Gregg. And if anybody's got any doubts about that story, I will tell you the story is 100% correct. 100%. And that's why they've spent a minimum of £500,000 trying to shut it up. So just remember, yeah, we're back on the subject of child abuse, and we're seeing senior people in government either helping the process or they're friends with people who are doing it. Well, there we are. Where's this then? This is one of Cameron's wars. This is Syria. And why are we interested in Syria? Well, we're interested in Syria because the European Union is now paying Common Purpose to train leaders to help what's going on. I've made a mistake there, haven't I? I've said Syria. I meant Libya. Okay? So Libya we bombed to pieces. The country is in total anarchy and chaos. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. What's the last thing they need? Common Purpose. And the EU's paying for them to go in. So there's no mistaking what's going on. Well, here they are, right? Absolute proof that Common Purpose is both sides of the political spectrum. It's a mix of communism, fascism and corporatism, communitarianism, if you look it up. What does that mean? An elite cattle. We are the cattle. Look at it in a different way. These are key people all around Leveson, all Common Purpose. This man, boss of every single civil servant in the country. Do you wonder why you're starting to see ridiculous, chaotic decisions by the civil service? Because they've had their heads screwed with. And we warned several years ago, this was a diagram in the UK column, talking about the government's Applied Behavioural Psychology Unit. These were the key players: Cameron, Gus O'Donnell, Jeff Mulgan, Francis Moore, Julia Middleton. Kerslake's replaced those two. Okay? And then what they were doing was using a specialist team looking at applied psychology, and they were using a man who was a specialist from France. This is Mr. Halpin from one of the London universities. These are dangerous people. They are using techniques to screw with our minds. We don't even know what they're doing. All of the main public sector is now infiltrated with this stuff. And the aim is to push it down to the lowest level through big society. If you want to know why it's becoming chaotic, disorganised, mindless decisions being made, it's because the people doing that are not in their right frame of mind. And we'll do some more talks on how exactly it's done. They're after everybody. So that's the family in front of the TV, and it says obey. It's a network. It's real because here is the British government's nudging applied behavioural psychology being sold to the Australians. Leveson in Australia, we're telling them how to brainwash Australian citizens. It's incredible, isn't it? And this is something that came to light the other day. These are two research units. One was set up in Heath's time, the Information Research Department, and what it was doing was tracking what people were thinking and writing about. So we think East Germany was over there. Heath had set it up here. Public servants watching and spying on us. And now there's a new version of it called the Research, Information and Communications Unit. They say they're doing that, but what they're really doing is seeing what all of us are talking about. Here she is, Julia. That's what happens to you if you eat too many baked beans. That is the only joke in this talk. And this is what they say. In every society, there's a space between the individual and the state. We're going to fill it, and we're going to create a common educational experience. That's massive reframing. Who are they? Well, it's easy. Who funds them? Yeah? It's easy to see who these people are when you track the money. Here they are saying that they're not going to use beyond authority. Leveson leading beyond authority. Hospital people deciding they're not going to treat an old person, leading beyond authority. Policemen stopping you when you haven't committed an offence, leading beyond authority. That's where all this agenda's coming from. Here's a woman reframed out of her head. Chief Executive of Suffolk, she spent £400,000 of taxpayers' money reframing her colleagues. Does anybody know what happened to her financial officer? He hung himself. How do they corrupt organisations? This is a lady called Lynn Homer. She's probably not in her right mind because of the number of common purpose courses she's been through. So let's look at her as an example. When she was chief executive of Birmingham City Council, there was more fraud and corruption ever seen. So eventually the electoral office described it as a banana republic. What did they do with her? They promoted her into the border agency. Why are there no border controls? It's nothing to do with colour. It's to do with the fact that you are pouring people into the country to create pressure, angst. The public services can't possibly keep up with it. It's to create angst and get everybody fighting. That's why there's no border controls. You put an idiot in charge of border controls. This is some of the comments on it. What do you do when she's completely messed up border controls? You promote her. She goes for transport. And what did they do with her when she'd messed up big chunks of transport? they put her in charge of Customs and Revenue. And here is Sir Gus O'Donnell, then the head of the Civil Service, saying what a great choice this lady was to make one of those posts. Right? These are disruptors, people you deliberately put in to mess up what's going on. Right, 5 minutes, I'm really going to go. Roger Helmer hosted the very first talk I ever did on common purpose. I put up evidence. At the end of the meeting, I turned round to have a chat with him. He'd gone. He never spoke to me again. He's an MEP. This is what he recently said. I have to admit, I thought the concerns about common purpose have been overblown. They seemed like a bunch of fairly harmless lefty do-gooders. I'm afraid recent reports have changed my view. The investigation into common purpose must continue before they become a fifth column. They are a fifth column, if they have not achieved that already. I don't dislike Mr. Helmer, but he suffers from something a lot of politicians suffer from. He is unbelievably arrogant. And he did not bother to look at a single shred of evidence initially. He should be wetting himself if he really knew what was coming. Here's the backup network for common purpose. So at the moment, we've got Theresa May sitting in the middle of a spider's nest where all these authorities are spying on us, and they can section us. Here she is, even Russia Today warning about what this woman is setting up in Britain. It makes me laugh. I just go back in my career 30 years ago, and I'm saying, well done the Russians, warning us that there's a dictatorship coming. Right? Common purpose says what it's doing. Leaders doing unusual things. That's what's happening. Graduates lighting fires to create change, small changes brought about by leaders who've themselves changed. Blair and Cameron, both common purpose, and they set up common purpose in India. It's a worldwide movement. Hacked Off. Here's Ed Miliband promoting Hacked Off. There's no doubt what these people are doing. Here's Clegg. He's a very dangerous man because he sits in the background. And he's, at the moment, suggesting, well, he's done it, I think, given these men Nobel Peace Prize for wrecking Europe. Labour says it's turning up the heat on the Prime Minister. No, they're not. They're working together. So here they are. Different colours, same political agenda. They're destroying Britain. What do we do about it? We've got to know it's worldwide. We've got to know it's in Parliament. We've got to know the United Nations is a big part of it. And we've got to expose things. So, very quickly, a lot of good people. Pie and Mash Films. How many of you have seen any of those films by Bill Maloney? Send them to your friends as a Christmas present. They'll love you for it. Lou Collins, single mum, gets off her bottom, now running a radio station on FM, talking to Tories. They hate it. TNS in Ireland. Here's a Royal Marine, started a fight on common law, now with 30,000 people following him. One man. InfoWars. David Icke, Free Thinking Voice, you might not have heard of this one, based in Ireland, doing incredible stuff, exposing what's going on with the children. Patrick's here somewhere, 21st Century Wire. Kevin Annett, how many of you heard of Kevin? If not, get on Google and see what he's talking about. This man here, Pack of Trouble. So thank you to Ian for setting this up. And I'm just going to be a little bit of a smart arse and say this was one of the very early UK column headings where we warned people we were being attacked by our own politicians. If we want to stop what's going on, all of us have got to be supporting and protecting the free media. Yeah, you've got to start talking to people about it. What you now know is going on, how Leveson was a scam. Talk, talk, talk. The more you talk, the quicker we win. And anybody is suggesting violence, they're on the other side. Okay? It doesn't matter who you are in Britain at the moment, you've all got to work together. Yeah? Divided we fall, united we stand. Thanks very much.